Most men have a different version of themselves that shows up when a woman they actually want is standing in front of them. It's a slightly edited version. It's a little more polished. It's a little more careful about what he says. And it's tuned a little bit more into seeing how she responds. But in doing so, it's a little less honest about who he actually is. He isn't lying, but he is filtering. The worst part is he usually doesn't even know that he's doing it. He just knows that around her, he feels like he needs to figure out the right thing to say instead of just saying what he actually thinks. She doesn't want that edited version. She can't want it because it doesn't have a story. It is a performance. So the question is not how to say the right thing. The question is, why don't you trust what you would normally say on your own? That question leads you to the real answer. And by the end of this video, I want you to understand exactly what that answer is, because it'll explain more about your dating results than anything else you've ever been told before. When men come to me with inconsistent results, the conversation usually starts in the same place. He thinks the problem is his looks or his confidence, maybe he's being too nice, or that he doesn't know what to say at the right moment, or maybe that women in his city are difficult. I know a guy who moved halfway across the country because he thought the women were too difficult in his city. That's not the case at all. Or that the apps are somehow stacked against him. Or maybe he hasn't found the right advice yet. I don't dismiss any of those things. Some of those things are real and genuine contributing factors, but they're almost never the root cause. I've worked with enough men at this point that I can tell you the root cause is always the same thing. What I actually see is a man who hasn't been telling himself a clear story about who he is, what he is building, what he believes, what kind of life he is living, what kind of woman actually belongs in his life. These are things that he has never considered. Without that, his dating results become random. He pursues women that are not compatible because he doesn't have a filter. He censors himself around the women he wants because he doesn't trust that who he is actually going to be enough. He compromises in relationships because he doesn't have a direction that matters more than keeping her around. That is a story problem, not a lines or a tactics problem. So, there is a false solution. The advice most men try first is behavioral. Be more confident, be more direct, be more mysterious by pulling back more or texting less. Maybe dress better or be a little more funnier, wittier, or work on your banter. Look, some of this stuff isn't wrong. Presentation does matter. Behavior does matter. How you communicate absolutely does matter. But there is a glass ceiling that you're going to hit when you only focus on behavior. You can optimize every bit of behavior, but if the underlying story that you have about yourself is still broken, then what you end up with is more of a performance. It looks like something attractive, but it doesn't actually generate attraction. So you say the right things, and she still gives you the usual nice to meet you. Because attraction isn't a checklist. It is a coherence check. She's not consciously asking herself whether or not you're hitting the right mark or saying the right thing. She's asking something that's more instinctive. Does this man add up? Does his behavior match his presence? Does his presence match his life? Is there a consistent version of this person that I can actually feel? When the story is missing, the answer to all of that is no, even if you said everything technically correct. Now, I want to introduce a concept here. It is the second pillar of how I work with men through a framework I call VSN, Value, Story, Narrative. In the previous video, I talked about values. They're the things that actually matter to you, the things that emotionally resonate with you. These are the things that, when you live without understanding them, you will create friction and discomfort. I will link to that video at the end of this one. But definitely go back and check that one if you want to understand that bit more deeply. Story is what happens when those values start to become a life. Your story is not your biography. It is not a dating persona. It is not something that you build for women. Your story is the role that you occupy in your own life. Think of it like your game. It's sort of like a video game, but in real life. It's this sense that your story is a set of rules that you choose to live by. It is your definition of success or failure. It is the standards that govern your choices and the direction you have for your life. You set those rules. Nobody else does. Even if someone tells you to live a certain way, you are the one who ultimately decides to allow that structure to become part of your life, which means that the man you are right now, the way that your dating life looks, the women you attract, and the results you get is a product of the game that you have been playing, whether you chose it consciously or not. It is who you actually are. It is what you are building. It is what you believe. It's where your life is going. And most critically, what kind of woman actually makes sense inside of that life and the kind of woman that doesn't. In this way, you're going to get exactly the type of woman that you feel like you deserve. And that's a key point. When you see a woman, you say, oh, she's out of my league, you will never have her. This is something that women know. They are looking for men who feel like they deserve her. A man with a clear story about who he is and the type of woman that belongs in his life is magnetic, and not because he is performing. It is because he is coherent and consistent. His behavior makes sense. His choices make sense. The way he moves through the world makes sense. A woman encounters that, especially one who's spent a lot of time around men who don't have this, and she feels it immediately. A man without a story becomes reactive. He changes who he is based on the woman in front of him. He second guesses himself. He filters what he says. He plans dates like they are some kind of audition. He gives up on things that matter to him that make the relationship work. None of these things create attraction, and every one of them erodes it. The real problem is not your text. It's not your opener. It's not even the venue you choose. It is your story. It is the life that you are living. Story is not a tactic. Let me make this extremely explicit, because a lot of men try to gamify it, hence the term game. Your story is not something you do. It is not a persona. It is not even an identity that you construct to attract a particular type of woman. It is who you actually are. If it is rooted in your values, it is the part of you that emotionally resonates. Which means that if you don't know who you are, if you haven't built a clear direction or a set of values that you're living by, a sense of the kind of man that you're trying to become, then there's no story to tell. And what fills the vacuum is a performance. It is tactics. It is an edited version of yourself that you think is attractive. The man with a real story doesn't need to perform. He just shows up, because the version of himself that shows up is the same version that existed when no one is watching. That consistency is what women respond to. It is not about the performance. It is about the man behind it. So, for this reason, you get to choose your hard. And this is something I want you to understand before we go any further. Building a clear story takes real work. Self-examination, choices that are maybe sometimes uncomfortable, and a direction that you can commit to even when being flexible would be easier. There's going to be some part of you that is going to resist putting in this kind of effort. But here's what I want you to consider. Not building a story, or building a story that you don't really want, comes with a cost. It is a different kind of hard. It is hard to be disciplined. It is hard to train, to eat right, to build a body that reflects the way you want to feel. But it's also hard to be overweight and unhealthy, and to carry that unhealthiness in your body every single day. So you choose your hard. It is hard to live within your means. It is hard to build skills and to build value in the world that allows money to follow. But it is also hard to be broke. You choose your hard. It is hard to build a clear and compelling story, to know who you are, to live without compromise, to be the kind of man that the right woman wants to be around. But it's also hard to be lonely and to keep getting inconsistent results that you don't actually want and don't understand why. So, choose your hard. The man without a clear story is not on the easy path. He's on a different type of hard. It is one that doesn't lead where he wants to go. The question is not whether this costs you something, because it will. The question is whether this version of hard is something you're willing to take on, and whether or not it's going to build on something worth having at the end of it. Now, one of the clearest places that this breaks down is in how men approach dates. A lot of men treat a date like an audition. They try to pick a venue that's designed to impress. Maybe it's an expensive dinner, or maybe it's an expensive cocktail lounge. They think that doing this and talking about interesting things, that they're actually building an experience that she's going to tell her friends about and trying to win her approval. This entire frame is completely wrong. A date should be a natural extension of your life. If you go to nice restaurants normally, then by all means, take her there. But if you're into dive bars and live music, then go there instead. Or maybe you're into obscure coffee shops or rooftop bars or maybe bookstores. It doesn't matter. The venue is not the point. The point is whether the invitation feels like, this is my life, come experience it with me. When you bring her into your world, she is not evaluating you. She is entering a life that already exists without her. And that is a fundamentally different position than auditioning for her approval. A nice restaurant can work. And if that's something that is genuinely who you are, then that's fine. A dive bar can work too if that is a reflection of who you are. There's no universal correct answer. There's only congruence. Now, the filter. There's something that happens to most men when they're around the women that they actually want. They develop a filter. They begin to censor themselves. They overthink what they say. They suppress opinions that they would normally share. They try to sound more impressive than they actually feel, and they try to avoid being too forward or too interested or too overtly sexual because they don't want to blow it. They want to try to become the kind of man that they think she wants. This is a story problem. When your story is clear, when you know who you are, and you trust that it is enough, you don't need to censor yourself for beautiful women. It doesn't make sense to. What comes out of you when you're not thinking about it is actually worth something, and part of you knows it. When your story is absent or shaky, the filter kicks in automatically because you don't trust it. And the filtering is her first signal that something isn't right. Not because she's reading you analytically, but because it doesn't feel like she's talking to a real person. It feels like she's talking to someone who is managing an impression. Women have a very good radar for this sort of thing, and they do not feel attraction for performance because it's fake. Here's an example to paint a mental picture of what a compelling story should look like. Imagine you are a first responder, say a firefighter or a paramedic or an officer. Pick one, doesn't matter. You're at home, you're cuddling with your woman, and you get the call. There's an emergency. You need to go. Do you hesitate? No. You don't even consider it. You just go. Not because you don't care for her, but because your life has something in it that is not up for negotiation when it matters. Your role does not get set aside just because staying would be easier or better for her. Most men don't have that level of urgency, mostly because they don't need to. But they don't need to be first responders to develop it. But there has to be something in your life that functions the same way. Something you would not just abandon because she wants more of your attention. A direction, a purpose, a set of responsibilities that exists whether she's there or not. Most men don't have this. Not because they're lazy, but because their lives are flexible enough that they've never had to decide. That flexibility is exactly what's making your dating life harder than it needs to be. There's a quote that I like from Tyrion Lannister in the Game of Thrones, and he said this: "Never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you." That is exactly what your story is. Not pretending your flaws don't exist, not becoming someone else, knowing what you are, owning it completely, and living it every day. If that level of conviction in your own direction sounds like something you don't have and you don't know how to build, that's exactly what we work through on a coaching call. Your story has specific gaps, specific places where it's incoherent, specific patterns in your dating life that are a direct result of what's missing or unaligned. And a YouTube video cannot identify those for you because it doesn't know your life, your history, or what you're actually doing with women. It can't know where the real breakdown is. That's what coaching is for. If you want to know more, you can see the link in the description. There's a practical side to this that most dating advice completely ignores. Where you spend your time matters. Not in this, this is the best place to meet women sense, but in a congruence sense. Generic environments produce generic results. A random bar gives you random women, random values, random lifestyles, random compatibility. The only thing you actually know about her is that she was at the same bar that you were at the same night. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but more specific environments produce more specific results. So if you're the type of guy who showed up at industry events or cultural gatherings, the kind of places that fit your lifestyle, the women there are almost pre-selected for a certain type of guy. If you're creative and you're at gallery openings or live music or art festivals, same thing. Or if you train, maybe you're at a climbing gym or running club or maybe a martial arts class, again, same thing. This is not about being elitist. It's about going where your story makes sense. The women who are compatible with your life are going to be environments that fit your life. If your environments are misaligned with who you are, your results are going to reflect that. And you're going to keep meeting women who just don't fit. If you're not sure whether the environments are a good fit in your story, that uncertainty itself is a sign. A man with a clear story knows exactly where he belongs and exactly where he doesn't. So what happens when your story breaks down in a relationship? What happens in relationships is where a lot of men lose the thing that made her want to be there in the first place. When you were dating, the dynamic was clear. You had a life. She was stepping into it. You weren't focused on her approval. She had to orient towards you. This created attraction because it creates a sense of pull, that she feels drawn to you. Then things become more serious, and gradually, almost without noticing, you start making the relationship the center of your life. And in doing so, you sort of start to organize your time around her. You stop doing the things that made her interested in the first place. You start compromising on things you normally wouldn't have touched 6 months ago, or a year ago, or 10 years ago, whatever. All in the name of making the relationship work. And every one of these things erodes very slightly the thing that she was attracted to. And over time, it slowly erodes at the base of the relationship. The principle is simple. The relationship can become a part of your life, but it cannot become a replacement for your life. You need to fill your own cup first and then let it overflow into hers. That overflow is the foundation of the relationship that can actually build and become more than the sum of its parts. When you empty your cup to fill hers, the relationship becomes one-directional. The pressure and the expectation increases, and the attraction ultimately decreases. And she'll often leave because what she's responding to is the loss of that dynamic. And it's not necessarily any specific thing that he did. Women do not break up with men they are still chasing. The moment she leaves, it means she already stopped. The dynamic has already shifted. And in most cases, the man compromised on himself that caused the shift without realizing it. And that is your story at work, or rather the absence of it. So what's the reframe? Here's the thing that most dating advice you consumed has missed. It tries to change your behavior to produce a different result. Say this, not that, go here, not there, text like this, be like that, whatever. Okay? Sometimes it works in a certain context with a specific type of woman, but only for a limited period of time. And then when the context changes, or maybe she does, then you're back out trying to figure it out all over again. The reason it doesn't hold is because of this. Behavior without story is always situational. You're not going to build something that runs on its own. You're manually operating a system that requires constant input. The moment you relax, the performance ends. And the story is what happens when you stop performing. It creates the results when you're not even trying. That's why some men walk into a room and people gravitate towards them before they even said anything. It's not a trick. It is coherence. A man whose behavior and presence in life all point in the same direction, that is what we're building. Not a better set of tactics. It is a better version of the man underneath. Here's the question I want you to think about. If the woman you want to attract stepped into your actual life right now, okay, not just a dating profile, not just, some text thread, but your actual life, would she find evidence of the man you say or the man you think you are? Would your environment reflect your values? Would the way you spend your time reflect what you say matters to you? Would the people around you, the things you're building, the direction you're moving, would all of these things tell a story that she can feel? If the answer is, not really, you just identified the root problem. It's not your confidence. It's not your opener. It's not your photos. It's your story. Here's what that actually means. Knowing that you have a story problem is not the same as knowing what your story problem actually is. Your dating life has very specific patterns. Your story has gaps in it. There are specific places where it's unclear or incoherent or possibly even missing entirely. And it's those gaps that show up in your results in very specific ways, whether it's the women you attract, the point at which things go sideways in a relationship, or the reason you feel like a completely different person with some women. A video can give you an idea, but it cannot tell you which part of your story is actually broken or what it would actually take to fix it. That requires someone who can actually answer the right questions and hear your specific answers. That is the conversation I have with every man that I work with, and it's where the real results happen. If you are ready for that conversation, you can book a consultation. There's a link in the description. We'll get on a call, I'll ask some questions, we'll figure out precisely where your story is breaking down, and we'll figure out the path forward and exactly what that looks like for you. Most men walk away with more clarity than they've ever gotten from months or even years of content. If you're not there yet, that's fine. Start with the VSN Alignment Assessment. It is a short diagnostic that tells you which part of your VSM framework, value, story, or narrative is the weakest point in your dating life right now. That is also in the description. I will link the values video here. You can go here if you want to understand the foundation of what we just talked about. The narrative video is next. That's where we cover how your story is actually communicated through your behavior, through your words, through your presence. That is coming soon, and it will be linked here when it's published. If you want more content like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And apparently, YouTube thinks you should watch this video next, so I guess check that out. That's all for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one.